that if we ask for forgiveness, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So he said, how does grace, this power source, fit in with forgiveness? Because from the get-go, Joseph, I'm going back to my original drawing right here. From the get-go, what you see that part of the covenant agreement is, part of the grace that's given to me is if I am a goober, with a capital G-O-O-B-E-R, if I'm a goober and I falter, which I don't have to, but if I'm a goober and I do falter, then God, in this agreement, in the grace, has provided the means for me to be restored. How is that? By confessing it, by saying I was wrong, by saying I was proud, by saying I was scared, by saying I was thinking only of me. And then, will you forgive me? See, that's part of the grace. So when I ask forgiveness, then part of the grace process is if I do blow it, then what do? You come back and you say, will you forgive me? And he goes, done. That's the beauty of the forgiveness. But if I don't believe it, if I don't receive that grace, then guess what I'll do? I'll live in guilt. Right? Okay, you tracking with me?
I'm also putting Adam in the garden into that as I'm listening to you.
Yeah, well, Adam in the garden is significant, and we think that God was going, you sorry son of a biscuit eater, you ate of that fruit? I can't believe that you did that. That's not what God is. That's not the way that Hebrew reads. The Hebrew reads like this. God's tender and compassionate. He's going like this. Oh, my stars. Oh, I see you're scared to death. I see you're hiding over there. I see you're naked. I see you cover yourself with fig leaves. Oh, my stars. What are you doing over there? Adam, come over here. Come here. Let me hold you. Let me love you. But we think God's going, well, you sorry sinner, you're going to hell now. You're going to hell.
Well, maybe even the sound of God's voice changed. Maybe it was seemed softer before, but now it's the thunderous mountain voice.
No, we're back to anger.
Actually, it was actually the softest voice.
Oh.
It was the softest voice when he was in the garden. Not the Mount Sinai, because the Mount Sinai voice that scared even Moses was not a, like, I'm going to scare you voice. It was like God's manifesting his presence. But when you are a goober with a capital G, then what God does, he goes, let me speak to you like a daddy would speak to his child who's scared to death because I've offended my daddy. Come here. Okay. And then he wraps his arms around you and he says, it's going to be okay. And you don't feel it. But when you understand that's part of the grace agreement that you've made,
because he's catching every tear.
if he's catching every tear, whether it's over my sin or whether it's over the loss of my children or whether it's the whatever it is, I'll guarantee he's not just going, you sorry rat. No, he's going, okay, I know you're frail. I know you're but dust. I know like you're a bruised reed. I know you're like a smoldering flask. You're about to go out, but I am not going to let it go out, and I'm not going to break you off. I'm going to be tender and loving to you.
There are consequences
Without a shadow of a doubt.
mm-hmm.
No bones about it.
for your decision.
But God says, you know what? I love you enough. But if I'm going to act contrary to the covenant of grace, as though I'm going back to my picture up here, then there are consequences. There are consequences. You know, it wasn't until the 1900s, that this new mindset of grace came out. Really began with the Reformation preachers, but it became spread universally, this concept of grace. But when you go back, if somebody ever made a business agreement with somebody else, and then one of the partners broke that agreement, it would be known throughout the entire community they just broke grace. They just fell from grace. You know? This is the reality. This is the reality of our lives. And so what I want to do is I want to say, boy, God, show me your grace. Show me your grace. Show me your grace. Show me your covenant. Show me your promises. Show me the way that you lift me up. And I want to receive your grace. And I want to understand that I am who I am because of the grace of God. That's what I want. What an amazing truth.
So maybe we can talk about Adam more later.
Oh man.
That's because I always thought he was a pacifist compared to the second Adam, who was not a pacifist, Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I don't have a good handle on that. Sorry there.
No, that's actually good. And this is the beauty. This is the beauty of every time that we've come to FaithWorks. Every time I've ever been here at FaithWorks and we set the mandatory morning and evening studies, this is what happens every time. All of a sudden you go, well man, well what about this and what about this? And then you go, okay, well let's call it the night. And then let's when we're eating lunch or we're having breakfast or we're doing whatever, we'll have conversations. That's what the scripture talks about. When you're sitting down, when you're rising up, when you're laying down, when you're walking in the way, talk about these things. But we have gotten to the point to where we know all of the sports stats and we know all of the financial records and we know all the things that are going on in the world. But when it comes to the things of God, guess what the one topic is that we don't spend much time talking about? The topic that's probably the most important to talk about. Because then that'll tell me how I treat my clients there in the colonic room. It'll teach me how I treat my patients there in the massage room. It'll be the people that my clients that I build decks for, or fences for, or stain for, or pressure wash, or do cement work, or whatever it is that you do. The way you treat your honey bunny, the way you treat your kids, the way you treat your grandparents, the way you treat your grandkids. Man, it's all about the grace. So if I don't know the grace, then I just say whatever I want to say, and I live whatever I think it is, and then I create my own dynamic. Versus going, why would you want to create your own dynamic when he's created the greatest dynamic? And the more that I know about that dynamic, the higher I live. The higher I live, the more powerful the realm. The more powerful the realm, the more Satan gets his bowhunty handed it to him in a bucket. And the more that I'm victorious, and the more he gets rewarded. Grace is, this whole book is grace. Whole thing. Last question.
It seems like that grace may be tied in with the forgiveness, but the learning of the grace is very important with the manifestations of the sons of God.
Good for you. Exactly.
I
Right.
think that's a key characteristic.
Excellent, Joseph. Very good. Well, why don't we close in prayer?